what critical race theory and whatever invention du jour of the left is really all about, isn't it? And to truly understand that, let's understand the reality of Karl Marx's social, political, and economic policy, now known as Marxism. Marxism is premised on the belief that in a capitalist system of government, there are two classes, capitalist and worker. And the relationship between those two classes is considered inherently exploitive and will always lead to class conflict and ultimately a workers' revolution or communism. In fact, Karl Marx believed the progression from capitalism to communism was a natural one. At the core of this problem, he believed, was that private property and laws designed to protect he believed the problem was private property and our laws that are designed to protect your interest and your ability to transfer it. And of course, we all know where this policy ultimately leads to revolutions resulting in the seizure of private property and the means of production. And I don't think any communist revolution was natural, as Marx predicted. They were all the result of radicals absorbing his philosophies and working to make them a reality by taking advantage of the working class. Well, that didn't work in the United States of America. It wasn't for a lack of effort on the part of the left and academia in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And that's because we are the first society in history that has offered the worker the opportunity to become a capitalist. Whether you're in marketing, whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, a plumber, a mechanic, etc., you don't have to spend your entire life working for that big marketing conglomerate, hospital, national law firm, chain auto shop, or any other, man, so to speak, right? You always have the opportunity, if you're willing to take the risk, to go out on your own, open your own shop, and if it's your MO, build your own conglomerate. And guess what? The capitalists did the same thing. The capitalists that the workers worked for, they did the same thing at one point in their lives. And that's how they rose to control the means of production. We are the only civilization where Jeff Bezos gets to fly in his own questionably shaped rocket into space. We're the only civilization where any man can grow up to build his own phallic symbol, right? Hope the Me Too police aren't here tonight. So what we have seen the last 40 years is the transformation of that perceived struggle. It's no longer about capitalism and worker on its face. It's still about classism, though. It's about race, gender equality, sexual orientation, religion, gender identity. The list goes on and on and on. Just about every civil rights movement in this country has been weaponized to sow class struggle and division. And even though the worker is lost in this syntax, these perceived struggles still find their root in the capitalist versus worker philosophy. That's why we hear phrases like the economy isn't working for everyone, or capitalism is failing, or people want a decent wage for a decent job. Worker has been replaced with they, and they means any number of the classes that I just mentioned. And this is where critical race theory comes into play. What better way to train young Americans to be anti-capitalist than to teach them in all of our institutions are embedded with systemic racism and designed to work against them. And it's really quite brilliant in its inception. Instead of saying capitalism isn't working for everyone, we say banking works for you, but not you. Our education system works for you, but not you. Something as benign as property appraisal works for you, but not you. And we can see exactly what it is doing. It is defining who you and you are, and it is doing so exactly in Marxist terms. You're the bourgeoisie. Every part of the economy works for you. Or you're the proletariat. The economy doesn't work for you, and you're being exploited. Now, do Democrats and the left ever have a real solution to this perceived class struggle? Of course not. It's all smoke and mirrors. Let's talk about education, for example. I think Republicans will agree with Democrats that public education isn't working for everyone, particularly the poor and minority communities. But we actually propose solutions. We say let's create opportunities for kids to attend the school of their choice. Let's create scholarship opportunities for the poor, for the disabled, for the bullied. Let's lift up the downtrodden through educational choice. Let's give parents the opportunity to help their kids find the best place for them to learn. And imagine that, choice. That's a word Democrats love to use in another more sinister context, isn't it? And they fight us tooth and nail on real solutions like that. And they may go on to say that, hey, it's my body, my choice, but they refuse to say it's your education, your choice, your child, your choice. So today we are talking about critical race theory. Tomorrow we will be talking about whatever other machination the left conceives to serve as a means to its end, and the end they seek will always be what is not and would not happen naturally. That's tonight's chairman's message. All right, and for our program tonight, I turn it over to our vice chairman, Adam Ross, who's going to moderate our guest speakers and questions.
Good evening again. So tonight we have two great guest speakers for our panel. First is not only our state representative, but he's also a candidate for County Commission District 5, none other than Chris Latvala. And we also have candidate for school board, Stephanie Meyer. So I'm going to give both of our panelists an opportunity to talk about school boards and critical race theory, and then we're going to open it up for some questions. If you would like a note card, just put your hand up and one will be passed out to you, and you can write down a question. It'll be given to me, and I'll ask the questions. And once Harry's done taking this picture, we'll start. Here, I'll switch with you.
Oh, now it's on. We got to do the Harry picture first.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here and speak tonight.
Switch with me.
As Adam mentioned, I'm running for Pinellas County School Board in District 6. Just a really quick, I'll tell you a brief story about me, a little bit of information about me. I grew up here in Pinellas County. I attended Pinellas County Public Schools for all of my academic career. I am now a teacher here in Pinellas County. I teach at Keswick Christian School. I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade history. And today was our first day back at school. So if you know a teacher, or you love a teacher, or you've been a teacher, you know that there is no tired like teacher tired. So, so love your teachers and show your appreciation. But tonight, I want to talk to you specifically about what critical race theory looks like in a K-12 setting. It's not going to jump off a page at you. You're not going to be able to open up the curriculum and see, oh look, my child's learning critical race theory today. It is an ideology. It is a theory. It is a lens in which people view history through. And so you have to have the skills to kind of be able to identify it. And so that's what I want to do tonight. Unfortunately, my Mac computer does not hook up to this screen. So I had some slides I wanted to show you, but I'm going to just talk through them briefly. So you also have on your seats a article from the Heritage Foundation that talks about how to identify critical race theory. So go ahead and read that, look over that, but we're going to talk a little bit about that. So critical race theory is a prism through which its proponents analyze all aspects of American life. And so when we're looking at K through 12 and how history and how all different subjects are being taught, it's going through this lens now. And it is happening here in the county. I'm going to give you some specific examples. This is also, the fundamental basis for this is normalizing a belief in the fact that systemic racism is something that the average everyday American experiences every day. Okay, and so that's really what is happening here in our schools. So I just want to give you a couple of examples, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to show you this, but I will say that I will be able to show you this on October 2nd at the Pinellas Federated Republican Women's CRT panel, we'll have it so that you can see it then. But just for example, Equity and Excellence Summer Trainings. This was a June and July summer training schedule for Pinellas County teachers. I just want to read you a couple of the headlines here. Intro to Equitable Grading. Equity Cohorts. The Achievement Gap. Anti-racism terminology. Monumental Myths documentary, which I know some of you have seen Monumental Myths documentary, and it is very sad. It's just a complete misrepresentation of American history. And so this is just a couple of them. You can just kind of gauge from that. Because what critical race theory does is it takes away equality and replaces it with the word equity. Okay, so that's one of the ways that you identify it. We also have an entire team now that works in Pinellas County Schools. It's an entire department that is titled the Equity Department. Okay, so this is in there, and it's, yeah. And a couple other places that some of these critical race theory ideologies are being kind of snuck into Pinellas County Schools is a app called Brain Pop. Has anybody heard of Brain Pop? Okay, it's videos that they play for the students in the schools, and there's no homework attached to it. Parents never see it, most usually. And really, parents started finding out about Brain Pop during COVID because their children were learning virtually and were seeing these things, and they were able to see these things firsthand. Another website that's being pushed in Pinellas County Schools is something called Teaching for Justice. This was founded by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and so this is a resource that teachers are being told to use, that kids are being exposed to. So write those down and check them out for yourself. But that's just a little bit about what is happening in the schools right now. And recently I brought this information to Chris, myself, and Barb, and so many other wonderful people in this room have been researching this stuff. So this is not just me, this is a lot of other people's work and time. And we brought this to Chris, and he really has realized the seriousness of this. And so I'll turn it over to him, and then we'll take questions.
Well, thank you very much, Stephanie. As was mentioned, I serve in the Florida House, but I also have the honor of serving as Speaker Chris Sproul's education chair. So I help oversee the education policy in the Florida House, and there are three subcommittees that serve under my full committee. And so, for instance, this past session, we did the largest, and I'm glad that the Chairman Jennings mentioned school choice, because this past session in Florida, under the Speaker's leadership, we passed the largest expansion of school choice, not only in Florida's history, but in the nation's history. And another thing that we did that I'm very proud of, and the governor's talked about it some, is we passed a civics bill, House Bill 5, Portraits and Patriotism, that will teach children the evils of communism, not just that communism is evil, which it is, but they will hear firsthand accounts from people that escaped communist countries such as Cuba, Venezuela, and other countries. And then thirdly, you probably heard about this, and this is where I spent a large portion of my time, a lot more time than I wanted to spend. And it was a bill that my Democratic colleagues went absolutely ballistic over. Was a bill, our Fairness in Women's Sports Bill, otherwise known as the Transgender Sports Bill. Now in Florida, if you're a boy, you have to play boy sports, regardless of what you identify as. And it's a very novel concept. And I do want to mention that bill would not have passed if it was not for Speaker Chris Sproul's And it was very ironic. Early on in session, it passed the House, and the Senate didn't hear it. And some of my colleagues were gloating, some of my Democratic colleagues were gloating, we killed your bill. And I, looked at them and smiled, and I wanted to say, well, if you only knew what I know. But the last day of session, when they literally were crying on the floor of the Florida House, they realized that we always win. So, but after session, and we had heard about critical race theory because it was in the news, and it was something that we were looking at, but there was a lot of other issues, such as the ones that I talked about, and then other bills, such as ones that would make it easier for college students to have freedom of speech on college campuses, especially for conservatives, which that's another novel concept. But there are a lot of college campuses that like to kick out groups that are more conservative leaning. So we had to spend some time and effort on that. And so we knew about critical race theory, but it wasn't at the forefront of our minds until really after session when it started bubbling up. And then, if anybody knows Barb Hazelton or Stephanie, you have a 2-hour meeting with them, and their priorities become your priorities. And so, basically, critical race theory is the idea that racism is inherent in everything, whether it's education or anything having to do with society. It all revolves around white people are inherently racist, because that's just the way we are, which is not true, but that's the thought of critical race theory. And so that's how they teach kids, from that mindset. And so the DOE and the Board of Education in July passed a rule basically banning critical race theory in Florida. And basically, and I'll read a little bit of the background so you have an idea. Currently, state law requires that public schools teach specific subjects such as the history of the Holocaust, the history of African Americans in slavery in the United States, and dangers of drug and alcohol abuse, the contributions of women and Hispanic people to the United States, and other various topics such as the dangers of communism that I mentioned. And other civics. The law also requires the State Board of Education to adopt rules and establish the academic standards for these subjects, setting expectations for what skills and knowledge students should learn at each grade level in course. In accordance with the State Board's authority to monitor district compliance with state law, the board recently amended Rule 6A, and then it gives the number, to provide the instruction on these required topics must be consistent with the state standard to be factual and not distort significant historical events, which is important. Critical race theory is not typically taught in elementary or secondary schools, and it is not covered by the state board's academic standards. And so the rule provides that the teaching of critical race theory in Florida's K-12 public schools is inconsistent with the board's standards, and therefore is prohibited. The rule also prohibits the use of materials from the 1619 Project, which is a set of essays published by the New York Times, which is not exactly our friends, which generally states that slavery was the driving force in the founding and development of the United States. The project has been criticized by several historians and academics as being misleading and factually inaccurate. The rule change does not prohibit instruction or discussion of difficult issues or events. Instead, it sets guidelines so that the information students are taught is accurate, based in fact, and not intended to make students feel inherently inferior or unfairly considered racist simply because of their race. So one thing that I wanted to mention before we open it up to questions is, despite the rule that the Board of Education did, there are districts that are still doing things that are kind of skating the rule and are somewhat disturbing. And so, as the chair, I get a team of about 9 people that work on my committee, including some smart lawyers. And we are currently looking at the issue kind of overall and in the broad sense. And so I will tell you that if there needs to be a bill next year, I suspect we will be filing one. So with that, I hope you'll have some
All right, thank you both. I have a couple questions. The first is, well, we're gonna find out, because I don't know the answer either. What is the difference between critical race theory and culturally relevant teaching?
One's a back door,
Yeah.
He said turn it
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. There really isn't much of a difference. Critical race theory, we already kind of went over what that is. Cultural relevance teaching is basically another word for critical race theory in a educational setting. And that documentation is found in, it's easy to find. I actually found a document on Pinellas County Schools' own website that equates the two.
I'm a product of the 1980s and 90s, and that's whenever I went to school, and I'm a public school kid. And one of the things that Barb and Stephanie showed me was a graphic of some kids that were standing on books to try to be even. And the white girl, I think, had she was standing on 1 or 2 books. The black kid was standing on 3 books, I think it was. And then the white boy was just standing on nothing. And I looked at him and I said, so this is basically affirmative action all over again. And so that's the way that, I think of it as it's not, we did a bill this year that was very important. It's called the Gender Gap Bill, where, and we did it based on a study from the Pinellas Education Foundation, where boys were learning at a slower pace than girls, and black boys are learning at an even slower pace than white boys. And so, and there are different reasons for that, but the main reason is boys' minds wander, they want to go outside and play, they don't want to be stuck in class. But there's numerous reasons why black students learn at a slower pace. Sometimes it's, if there are issues at home that they're thinking about and other things. And so there's a big difference between spending more time with minority students and showing them, a little more attention than it is punishing the white kids because they're, by virtue of them being white. And so, affirmative action is a no-no in my book.
So there's a couple questions on this that are related, but I'm gonna break it down because it's actually good subject matter. Can you explain how concepts such as critical race theory get incorporated into accounting curriculum?
Well, I'm sitting next to I'm sitting next to a reason. And she's not the reason, but she's running to counteract that reason. The school board. You have to have strong conservative leadership, whether it's the school board or the county commission. You saw that during the pandemic. When local governments make decisions, on things, and we saw today, the school board actually made a good decision. But when you have good conservatives like Stephanie Meyer representing you on the school board, you don't have idiotic policies like this. And so local elections matter. It's not just, certainly the President of the United States matters, and that's very important. but also who is on your local school board matters very much. And so with that in mind, make sure you vote for Stephanie Meyer next year.
Amen.
I believe this next part of the questions is probably going to be answered by Representative Blackmala. Does the legislature have the ability to stop critical race theory in schools?
Yeah, we can do a bill. And so if we, if legislation's needed, we would file legislation and stop that. And I can promise you, I don't want to speak on behalf of the speaker, but based on, he's a good friend of mine, and he's a very good conservative, and I can promise you that said legislation would pass the House with about 78 votes or so.
Sounds like you know about this, huh?
Why isn't it in place already?
Do you have,
Because you know it's gonna happen. Why isn't it in place already?
There wasn't a bill filed last year. Nobody filed that.
what guidance do you have for parents as they deal with the school board process and critical race theory as it goes forward?
So the biggest thing that I would say about this issue is go to your local school board meetings. This is why, and this is how these school boards have been allowed to get away with these things for so long, because they didn't think anyone was paying attention. And so they were able to do this. And like Representative Blackmala said, I was a product of the Pinellas County Public School System. My mother taught in Pinellas County for 34 years in the public school system. She retired in 2014. This started happening right before she retired in 2013, 2014. So this hasn't been happening for that long, but part of the reason why is because we haven't been paying attention. We have to show up at the school board meetings. If you have grandchildren, you have children in the schools, you need to be on top of what these kids are learning, ask them questions, go through their backpacks, look and read everything. Because, like I said, it's not gonna be something that's gonna be blatantly obvious to you, right? I meet with teachers and parents all the time who give me examples of these things. Most recently, I spoke with a Pinellas County school, former Pinellas County school teacher, now has I think it was a second grader or something like that. And her child came home from school upset because this child, second grader, was told that they were a racist because of the color of their skin. This was this summer in Summer Bridge. So we have to ask our kids questions. We have to know what is going home, what is being taught to our kids, look through their backpacks, show up at the school board meeting, and if you see something you don't like, speak up, for sure. It doesn't matter. That you're a stakeholder. You pay taxes in this county, your money, your taxes go to fund this curriculum. You are a stakeholder. You have a voice.
Why is it that now we're hearing about critical race theory and equity instead of equality in education? How long has this been building up historically? Is this a new movement or has it been going on for a while?
This is not a new movement. As you heard the chairman say in his speech, this is Marxism repackaged in the education system. It's going on in the workplaces too, in corporate America. I worked for Procter & Gamble before I became a teacher. It was happening there too. So this isn't just in our education system, but it's been more recently that it's been happening in education.
And I hate to put them on the spot, but I believe Disney has a training program for their employees for CRT. And if they don't, I apologize, but I think they do.
In the debate over critical race theory, how do parental rights weigh in?
Well, I am glad that ask that question because one of the bills I did not talk about that we passed this year was the Parental Bill of Rights that gave parents a slew of rights over the health care of their children and the education choices of their children. And recently, the hoopla over masks, when some school districts said that there was going to be mandatory masks, and the governor said, well, actually, there's not, because I'm going to do an executive order. The executive order that he did was based on the Parental Bill of Rights bill that we passed. And so that bill that was sponsored by Chair Grawl, that went through my committee and some others, not only covers masking, but covers a large slew of education issues that empowers parents.
So parents can opt their kids out? That's certainly.
So,
We're gonna give you each, we're gonna give you each of those. We're gonna give you each.
opportunity to kind of wrap up and discuss, critical race theory and give some final thoughts, please.
Can I just say that I think we have to keep in mind Martin Luther King, who said that we should all be judged not by the color of our skin, but the content of our character.
They don't want it.
Yes, I could not agree more, and I will say, again, as the product of the public school system, somebody, the daughter of a 34-year veteran in the public school system, I believe in the public school system. Very much so much that I am running for this seat because I believe it's so incredibly important that we have free education, right? That is for everyone. But the issue is that, again, like I said, this has been creeping into the curriculum, especially into the professional development for the last, since 2014 or so. So this isn't something that's entirely new. I think we're just starting to kind of really see the manifestation of it on a large scale. And then again, I think, part of the reason that it's becoming so apparent to so many of us is because of COVID. If anything good did actually come out of this within regards to education, we finally had a window into what was going on into the classrooms, whereas we didn't because, I'm a teacher, I'm a mom as well. Most of your kids are not going to come home and be like, guess what my teacher said today, And so now we know this is happening and we can kind of prompt those conversations with our kids. But I would encourage you to, and I know many of you in this room have been valiant warriors at these school board meetings, and I'm so grateful for that, and I know so many other parents across this county are grateful for you. We need to keep that up. We need to keep the pressure on. We need to reach out to Representative Latvala and let him know when these things are happening. You can reach out to me, and I would be happy to take any of your questions. You can reach out to me. You can go to my website and email me directly. My phone number, my personal cell phone's on there as well. So I'm here to have this discussion at any point in time with any of you. So thank you so much. It is votestephaniemeyer.com. Votestephaniemeyer.com.
VoteStephanieMeyer.com. And remember to vote for her next year. Yeah. And I just want to add that thank you very much for being here. And if there's ever an issue in education or in the state, please feel free to reach out to me. My phone number is 727-724-3000. My website's chrislatvala.com. After I have one more year left in the House, and then I plan on running for the county commission. And I will say that I think as was mentioned, this issue was brought to the forefront as a result of COVID when parents became teachers and started realizing what their kids were being taught at school, and realized that it was a bunch of baloney, so to speak. And so now we're gonna do something about it. And the reason why there hasn't been a bill filed is because we're not in session. We start session in January. And we've been out of session since, May, I believe, or April. And so, but I wanted to thank, Stephanie, of course, and Barb for, kind of bringing this to the forefront and explaining, the issues that we have in this county, and other counties. And those issues have been sent to Tallahassee and have been, and I've had conversations, with some of my colleagues about this already. So rest assured that, something will be done about it. But thank you very much, for being here and listening.
Can you repeat the number, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, 727-724-3000.
I got a question.
I think that two things are prevalent. We're very lucky to have great leadership from Representative Chris Latval chairing our education committee in Tallahassee. And we'll be even luckier once we elect Stephanie Meyer to the school board to represent us at the local level. Thank you both for being here.
All right, thank you all. And moving on to our agenda, the installation of new members. I'm going to turn it over to our general counsel, Michael Brodus, to install our new members.
Thank you, Ty.